Our guest today is Timothy Wise. He is an author. His most recent book, Eating Tomorrow, from New Press. He's the director of the Land and Food Rights Program at the Small Planet Institute in Cambridge. Smallplanet.org is the website. You can tweet him at Timothy A. Wise. Ranchers and farmers are setting fire to parts of the Amazon to clear land for cattle and soybeans, which kind of illustrates the dire warnings in the UN's report on climate change and land. And in this book, Eating Tomorrow, Timothy Wise talks about how current agricultural processes around the world are basically destroying our planet. Timothy, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks so much for being with us. What are the UN and IPCC reports saying about the rise of world hunger in our food systems?
Well, what the most recent report on climate change and land focuses on is the contributions of our food systems and of agriculture generally to the climate crisis. And that involves everything from deforestation, like we're seeing in Brazil, from the pressures and the incentives to grow more corn, soybeans, and cattle. And then the contributions to greenhouse gases from agricultural practices that are fossil fuel intensive. Chemical fertilizers are made from fossil fuels, and that are undermining the natural resource base on which future food production depends.
So why, in the face of this, is the U.S. actually expanding and exporting chemical-intensive agriculture? And what's the difference between companies in the U.S., and I realize Monsanto has been sold to a German company, Bayer, but companies based in the U.S., shall we say, or companies operating out of the U.S., their corporate evangelism, essentially, for this, and what role is the U.S. federal government playing in promoting this kind of agriculture?
Well, the federal government for a long time, along with almost all other international institutions from the UN agencies on down, have been promoting the quote-unquote modernization of agriculture. And the modernization of agriculture is really a recipe to turn the world into a replica of what the United States has done, eliminating almost all small farms, industrializing the agricultural system, moving people off the land with machinery and other technologies. And it's just inappropriate technology for the rest of the world because most of the world is fed by small-scale farmers. 70% of the food consumed in developing countries where hunger is still quite prevalent is provided by people in those countries, and the majority of that is provided by small-scale farmers.
So, I see that some of these fossil fuel companies, or these companies that are making these chemicals out of fossil fuels, are claiming that it is, quote, climate smart using fossil fuel-derived fertilizers and things, and pesticides and herbicides. Is that? Tell me about that.
Well, that's one of the smoke screens that's come up, what people call greenwashing. What they're saying isn't completely false. It's that their practices are so damaging now that you can tweak those practices to make them a little less damaging. So climate smart is anything that makes it a little less damaging. An example would be using no-till agriculture, which means you don't plow every year. And that means you have weed problems. So Monsanto has the answer for that. It's called Roundup. And it means you can plant vast swaths of, thousands of acres at a time of industrial soybeans and douse them with Roundup. And you're going to get credit in this system for being climate smart because you're not tilling the land to remove weeds in between your harvests.
That's amazing.
There's nothing climate smart about it.
Yeah. So tell me about the role of commercially developed hybrid, and particularly GMO seeds. And this kind of monoculture. You talked about thousands of acres of soybeans. What impact does monoculture like that have, and how is that impact either mitigated or made worse by the use of GMO products?
The big issue with hybrid corn for developing country farmers in particular is that they have to buy it every year. Most farmers in a place like Africa, in a continent like Africa, save their seeds from year to year and replant them. And the strategy of the seed companies and the governments and the Gates Foundation and groups like the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa have put in place all of these incentives to try to pressure farmers to give up their seed savings, give up their traditional practices of using seeds, and buy commercial seeds every year. And of course, those commercial seeds come as a technology package with commercial fertilizers, and that vastly expands the market for Monsanto, the fertilizer companies, and the rest.
And herbicides, too.
And herbicides, too. And the addition of GMOs makes it far more complicated. Most of Africa still rejects GMOs, particularly for food crops. So that's a good thing, but that's one of the last frontiers that the seed and chemical companies want to conquer. And that's why they're so intent on opening up Africa to the seed giants and the chemical giants.
Amazing.
And the GMOs.
To what extent do trade agreements like NAFTA impact all this?
Well, NAFTA and other trade agreements are all about empowering multinational firms to trade internationally and to operate internationally. That includes exporting their seeds, but it also includes exporting their crops. So developed countries by and large, with the exception of maybe Brazil and Argentina, are the main providers of basic agricultural commodities like corn and soybeans. And trade agreements open up developing countries to those imports. Those imports come in particularly cheap because we overproduce them and we subsidize them. And that's called agricultural dumping when a product is exported at below what it costs to produce it. We've been doing that for years and years, with a few exceptional years when prices were high.
Isn't this how we wiped out all these Mexican subsistence farmers, for example?
Exactly. A study that we did of the first 9 years of NAFTA showed that U.S. corn exports to Mexico went up more than 400%. They were going into Mexico at 20% below what it cost to produce the corn.
Wow.
And that prices that Mexican farmers could get for their corn went down 66%.
Yeah, which
just a shocking blow.
Yeah, which just devastated the Mexican agricultural sector, the small farming sector.
No, and it created an absolute rural crisis. The majority of people in rural areas live in poverty.
Yeah. So what do we do about this? I mean, is it the ag-biz lobby, the chemical lobby? I know here in the United States, our Supreme Court has said that basically, these corporations are persons and that they have, under the First Amendment, the right to own their own politicians and frankly, to say anything to influence the public. I don't believe that the corporations have that much power in a lot of European countries. How do we push back against this? And to what extent is this just, corporate lobbying and capture of the political sphere?
No, I saw it everywhere I went for this book. I studied the United States, India, Mexico, and 3 countries in Southern Africa. And everywhere I went, I saw how that agribusiness firms had largely hijacked the policy process to tailor policies in their favor. That's everything from a former Monsanto official actually drafting Malawi's seed policy and doing so in a way that would have made it, initially at least in his first draft, illegal for farmers to save, exchange, and sell their seeds. So what do they have to do? They have to buy from Monsanto, which controls 50% of the commercial corn seed market. Mm-hmm. It absolutely is about reining in the agribusiness giants, and certainly in the United States, that involves getting money out of politics as best we can. That's a difficult task, but people don't realize how much agribusiness is the agribusiness lobby, and it's a mistake to call it the farm lobby because it's really not lobbying for farmers. It's lobbying for corporations. They spend more than the defense industry does in Washington on lobbying.